This year, a country that pumps its own oil out of its own seabed tried to make petrol cheaper for its own people. It took the entire road tax off. Not a trim, all of it, to zero. 45 cents a liter, gone. Its drivers saved 4. 4 cents out of 45. Because in March, the month before the cut landed, the petrol stations put their prices up, by very nearly as much as the cut was about to take off. So when the tax hit zero, it mostly just undid the increase. Nobody broke a law. Nobody has to explain themselves. And in September, the tax comes back. That country is Norway, by the way. Sends every krona of its oil income to a sovereign fund and spends only the interest. Serious people. Serious institutions. Still 4 cents. That's not a policy failure. That's the clue. And once you see how it works, you'll understand every petrol price on Earth, including the one you paid this week. Start with the thing almost everyone gets wrong. You'd think there's a Norwegian oil price, and an American one, and a Saudi one. There isn't. There's one pool. Crude oil, in the government's own words, is traded in a global market, and the prices of the many streams produced around the world tend to move closely together. Not because anyone coordinates them, because a barrel is a barrel. Yours is interchangeable with mine, and if mine is cheaper, someone buys mine instead. You're already objecting, because there isn't literally one price. There's Brent, there's West Texas Intermediate, and Russian crude sells at a discount to both. All true, and it's the best evidence I have. Those gaps aren't separate prices, they're freight, and what's in the barrel. Which is why in 2023, the people who run the Brent benchmark added West Texas crude to it, the first non-North Sea stream in its history, and priced it with the shipping included. The gaps aren't a wall between markets. They're the toll for crossing. So somebody has to be collecting that toll, and it's the least glamorous job in the entire oil business. No drilling, no refining, no tankers, 2 prices and a spreadsheet. Here's the whole trade. Oil in one port is cheaper than the same oil in another port, by more than it costs to sail between them. So you buy the cheap one, you sell the dear one, and you keep the difference. Except you weren't the only one looking. Everybody with a screen and a ship is doing exactly that at the same time. All of you are buying in the cheap port, which pushes that price up. All of you are selling in the dear one, which pushes that price down. And the gap closes, not because anyone decided it should, but because you all made money from it. That's the entire machine. It isn't a conspiracy, and it isn't clever. It's what happens when a thing is identical everywhere, and anybody is allowed to move it. There are people who do nothing else. They have never owned a barrel, and most of them have never seen one. They watch 2 numbers, and they wait for the numbers to disagree. Nobody sets the world price. It's just the number left over when nobody can make a penny from the difference anymore. Which brings us to the most expensive experiment ever run on this question. America has been the largest oil producer on the planet for 8 straight years. In 2025, it produced a record 13.6 million barrels a day, breaking the previous world record, also American. In January, American petrol cost $2.94 a gallon. By May, $4.61, 57% in 4 months. Nothing happened in America. The Strait of Hormuz closed, 7,000 miles away, and the government's own analysts wrote that it reduced access to crude oil for much of the world. America outdrilled every country in history. It still couldn't price its own petrol. There is one way out of the pool, and nobody wants it. You can simply be unable to reach it. Canada's problem was never its oil. It was the traffic. Canadian crude is heavy, and heavy is worth less. Everyone knows that part. But watch what the regulator says. When the pipes aren't full, that quality difference is worth about $12.50 a barrel, and no more. So anything on top of $12.50 isn't chemistry, it's congestion. It's barrels queuing for a pipe, taking whatever the buyer at the far end feels like offering, because where else are they going to go? Then, in 2024, Canada finished an expansion that nearly tripled one of those pipes to the coast. The discount fell from $18.70 to $12. $12. The number the regulator said it should be when nothing is in the way. The barrels didn't get any lighter. They just got out. So back to Norway, which owns the oil and pays full price for it. Norway sells about 1.5 million barrels a day into that pool, and there is no Norwegian discount, no citizen rate, no producer's rebate. The exemptions in the tax code are for tractors and chainsaws. Here's why that's not stupid. Suppose Norway did give itself cheap petrol. Every liter burned at home at a discount is a liter not sold abroad at the world price. The difference doesn't vanish, it comes out of the fund. You'd pay exactly the same amount in a currency that never shows up on a receipt. The money you didn't make. You cannot consume your own oil cheaply. You can only choose whether the bill arrives at the pump or at the treasury, which means the receipt is mostly written before your country gets a vote. In America, across 2025, just over half of what you paid at the pump was the crude itself, 51.4%, set in the pool, stamped by the wire, no flag on it. Refining, about 16%, another world market with its own spread, which your energy minister also doesn't attend. The tower splits crude into petrol and diesel in fixed proportions and takes no requests. Distribution, about 18. Trucks, terminals, the forecourt, the coffee, nobody's villain. And then the last slice, 14.3%. Tax, that's the one with the flag on it. That is the entire sovereign portion of the thing you buy. And in America, it's about $1.07. It can be bigger. In Britain, fuel duty plus VAT is more than half the pump price. Norway's, before March, was similar, which is exactly why Norway had 4 kroner to give away. That's the lever. It's real, it works, and every krone of it is a krone the treasury stops collecting. What it cannot do is move the world price by 1 cent. And it doesn't even pull evenly in both directions. Measure enough fuel tax changes and a cut reaches about 70% of the pump. Putting the tax back reaches 80 to 100. Relief leaks. Reversal doesn't, which is what Norway gets in September. So let's try to manipulate this price every possible way, in order of confidence. Cap the price. Hungary did at 484 the liter. It lasted just over a year and was scrapped overnight in December 2022. And I'm going to let the International Monetary Fund describe why. The cap was abruptly terminated, it wrote, after it had led to widespread fuel shortages. Because a cap doesn't make fuel cheaper. It makes it cheaper if you can get it. The gap has to come out of somewhere, and if nobody is funding it, it comes out of supply. You don't get a low price, you get a queue. Hungary, for the record, tried it again this March. Subsidize it then. Pay the gap yourself. And this genuinely works. The Gulf states do it. Saudi petrol has been held at the same ceiling since July 2021, and the royal order is refreshingly blunt. The state shall shoulder any increase. That's not a loophole. That's the bill arriving at the treasury instead of the pump, exactly as advertised. It cost about 3.5% of Saudi Arabia's entire economy in 2024, and the IMF spends its annual visit politely suggesting they stop. Fine. Release the reserve. In 2022, America released 180 million barrels, the largest it had ever done, and Treasury's own economists estimated it moved petrol by 17 to 42 cents a gallon, with allies helping. Not nothing, tens of cents, for a few months. Then this March, it happened again, bigger. 172 million American barrels, borrowed rather than sold, inside the largest coordinated release ever attempted. 426 million worldwide. Brent went from $61 to $118 anyway. The reserve is now at its lowest level since 1983. It works a little, briefly, once. So here's your liter. All of it. Crude. Priced in a pool your country is one voice in. Refining. Priced in another market entirely. Distribution. Pennies. And the wedge, the only slice with a flag on it, the smallest one on the paper. Your government controls the small slice. It's the one they hold press conferences about. 4 strategies. Same wire. Norway pays itself full price, banks the difference, and taxes the pump. The Gulf sells below the world price and sends the bill to its own treasury, every year, forever. Canada couldn't reach the market, so geography took the payment, until somebody built a pipe. America outproduced the entire planet and stayed a price taker. Nobody escaped. Not one. The only slice that ever actually differed was the tax. Who got paid? Traders got dollars, refiners got the spread, treasuries got the wedge. Norm paid twice, once at the pump and once at the ballot box, for a promise that was never in anyone's gift. Which leaves the quiet winner, the country that stopped trying to beat the wire, taxed it instead, and used the money to buy a piece of everything else in the world. Norway didn't escape the world price either. It just stopped pretending it could.